The night Sophie chose to speak was supposed to be uneventful. Another polished royal interview wrapped in polite language and practiced smiles. But from the moment the cameras began rolling, something felt different. Her posture was straighter, her eyes sharper, and her voice, usually gentle, measured, almost diplomatic, carried a weight that sent a chill across the studio floor. It was the kind of tone only someone who had stayed silent for far too long could use. And as she leaned slightly forward, the world shifted. Because when a Windsor breaks the code of silence, it is never accidental. Outside, Windsor was wrapped in fog thick enough to swallow sound, but inside, tension crackled like electricity. Sophie wasn't here to gossip. She wasn't here to hint. She was here to tell a truth the palace had buried for years. A truth about Meghan, a truth about William, and a truth that, according to Sophie, ended Meghan's royal life overnight. She began gently, almost kindly, painting the picture of her years spent supporting the crown, stepping up during crises, maintaining the peace wherever she could. But then her voice dropped. Her expression hardened just enough to reveal the storm beneath her calm exterior. She spoke of boundaries crossed, of tension others ignored, and of a moment that forced the royal family to protect itself. Viewers didn't blink. The internet didn't breathe. Sophie wasn't describing misunderstandings or cultural clashes. She was describing a line crossed, a royal line. And she described the moment it all snapped. For years, the public had believed Meghan's exit was voluntary, a choice, a step toward freedom. But Sophie's words, carefully chosen yet devastating, told a different story. She spoke of actions that created discomfort, of gestures that raised eyebrows, of moments that left William noticeably uneasy. She didn't say the word flirtation yet. She didn't have to. Her tone alone painted the picture. As she spoke, viewers could feel the walls of Kensington Palace closing in. Because if anyone understood the unspoken rules of royal conduct, it was Sophie. And if she said those lines were crossed, the implications were nuclear. The world leaned closer. Meghan's supporters braced themselves. Her critics celebrated too early. And Sophie continued, unbothered by the storm she had just unleashed. She revealed something else too, something far more damaging. She had tried to guide Meghan, tried to help her adapt, tried to shield her from the brutal structure of royal life. But according to Sophie, Meghan refused, declined mentorship, rejected protocols, dismissed traditions. And this wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous to the family's unity. Then, finally, Sophie's voice softened, but her words hit even harder. The decision was not hers, she said. She didn't simply leave, she was encouraged to step back. And with that, the fairy tale shattered. Before we continue, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because Section 2 reveals the moment William realized Meghan had gone too far, and why it changed everything. But even with all the tension swirling behind those perfectly polished palace doors, what happened next stunned even the most seasoned royal insiders. Because instead of holding back, instead of choosing the usual royal silence, Catherine finally decided to speak. Not through an interview, not through a formal statement, but through something far more powerful. Her sudden disappearance from the scheduled event that every senior royal was expected to attend. One moment her name was on the list, the next it was quietly removed, and insiders claim it was done after a deeply emotional exchange between her and the king. That alone sent shockwaves rippling through the inner circle, but what leaked afterward turned the entire narrative upside down. A longtime royal staffer, someone who has seen decades of palace drama, whispered that the king's frustration had been building for weeks. He'd been balancing international pressure, increasing public scrutiny, and private family disagreements that no crown could possibly shield him from. And in that pressure cooker of royal expectations, Catherine became the unexpected target, not for what she did wrong, but for what everyone needed her to be. They needed her calm, they needed her stability, they needed her star power. And according to multiple sources, King Charles allegedly said something that shook her deeply. "You have to decide where you stand, now more than ever." To outsiders, it sounds like leadership, but to those who know her story, it sounded like a line drawn in the sand. The reality is that Catherine has always been the royal who plays the long game, patient, composed, diplomatic to a fault. But lately, the pressure of carrying the future of the monarchy on her shoulders has intensified beyond anything she's faced before. And when the king's tone shifted from guidance to demand, from collaboration to command, it reportedly pushed her into one of the hardest decisions she's made since stepping into the royal world. People close to her say she walked out of that room with tears forming, not from weakness, but from finally realizing how much was expected of her and how little compassion she was receiving in return. Meanwhile, Camilla's reaction added an entirely new layer to the unfolding crisis. Those present described her expression as a mix of shock and something harder to read, maybe concern, maybe calculation. And in palace politics, every expression is a message, every silence a statement. If Catherine stepped away, even briefly, the balance of influence inside the royal family would shift dramatically. And Camilla, who has spent years solidifying her role, understood the implications instantly. Without Catherine's presence, the monarchy would not only look weaker, it would be weaker. Yet the most surprising detail? This wasn't just a moment of tension. It was the emotional breaking point that would set off a chain reaction no one in the royal household could control. And from that moment on, nothing remained the same. What followed in the hours after Catherine stepped out of the council room became the kind of royal chaos that insiders dread and tabloids crave. Messages started flying between advisors, schedules were rearranged, and the palace communications team went into immediate damage control mode. It wasn't just that Catherine was upset, it was that everyone knew the public would sense something was off the moment she appeared, or worse, didn't appear at all. She has always carried herself with the kind of emotional discipline that makes people believe everything is under control. But today was different. Today, she wasn't just managing pressure, she was reacting to it. And that shift alone sent panic through every level of the institution. Sources claim that the king tried to resume the meeting as if nothing had happened, but those who were there say the energy in the room completely collapsed. Even Camilla, who has always been comfortable taking the lead when needed, stayed unusually quiet. Because the truth is, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, Catherine's presence carries a power that no title can manufacture. She is the monarchy's modern anchor, the one person the public still trusts without hesitation. Losing her, even momentarily, is like removing the central beam of a fragile structure that's barely holding its shape. As whispers spread through the corridors, people began taking sides, quietly, carefully, but noticeably. Some argued that Catherine needed more support, not more demands. Others believed the king was simply doing what a monarch must do, enforce stability. But in reality, it wasn't about politics or protocol, it was about humanity. Catherine had reached her emotional threshold, and the weight she'd been carrying for months had finally become visible. And the moment someone like her, composed, resilient, endlessly patient, reaches a breaking point, the entire system around her starts to tremble. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, journalists sensed something brewing. They started calling old contacts, checking schedules, cross-referencing movements, and analyzing every unusual change. And because Catherine is one of the most photographed and monitored women in the world, the absence of even a single appearance becomes a headline waiting to explode. One reporter described it perfectly. When Catherine disappears from an event, it's never random. It means something happened. But what no one saw was the quiet conversation happening somewhere behind closed doors, not between Catherine and the king, but between Catherine and one trusted figure who found her in a nearby hallway moments after she left in tears. According to someone who witnessed part of the exchange, this confidant told her something that shifted everything. "You don't have to carry this alone. Let them see the truth for once." It was a rare moment of honesty in a world built on polished surfaces and controlled narratives, and it planted a seed that would soon lead Catherine to make a choice that would shock the entire monarchy and the world watching it.
While the palace scrambled to regain some sense of order, Catherine slipped away to a quieter corner of the residence, a place she'd often used to collect her thoughts during difficult moments. But this time, the quiet didn't bring comfort, it brought clarity. Because for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't thinking about duty or appearances or the endless expectations placed on her. She was thinking about herself. And that shift alone was enough to send tremors through the royal foundation that has long relied on her strength to keep everything steady. Insiders say that in those minutes of solitude, Catherine replayed the king's words again and again, not because of the content, but because of the coldness. The monarchy had always been about unity, even when disagreements happened behind closed doors. But the tone she'd just heard was something different. It wasn't guidance, it wasn't concern, it was a demand. And demands, especially ones delivered with little empathy, have a way of revealing who truly feels valued and who simply feels used. But Catherine wasn't the only one doing some deep reflecting in that moment. Back in the council room, the king reportedly realized how badly the exchange had gone. One witness described him as looking haunted, as if the weight of the throne had finally caught up to him. Being monarch is more than ruling, it's carrying centuries of expectation, tradition, and responsibility. And perhaps in that pressure, he forgot that the people beside him are human beings, not extensions of the crown.
Camilla, for her part, remained tense and unusually reserved. She understood instantly that if Catherine walked away, literally or symbolically, the monarchy would suffer a blow it couldn't afford. Public trust has always leaned heavily toward Catherine, and any fracture involving her risks becoming a national crisis. Camilla has faced public scrutiny for years, but she also knows political instinct better than anyone in that room. And the instinct she felt then? Danger. As the situation escalated behind the scenes, the palace communications team did what they always do in moments of internal collapse. They prepared contingency plans, alternative statements, adjusted schedules, carefully crafted wording that explained everything without revealing anything. But even they sensed this wasn't like the typical disruptions. This time the emotion was too raw, too visible, too real to hide with polished language and carefully chosen adjectives. Meanwhile, Catherine's confidant, who had found her moments earlier, returned with a gentle message. "They're waiting to see what you do next." And that was all she needed to hear. Because Catherine has always understood that her strength doesn't come from compliance, it comes from choice. And in that quiet hallway, she made one. She would return, but not as the silent, endlessly patient figure they had taken for granted. She would return with intention, with clarity, and with a message, unspoken but unmistakable, that the monarchy could no longer expect her to carry more than any one person should. When Catherine finally stepped back into the public eye later that afternoon, the shift in her presence was immediate, subtle, but powerful enough that even those closest to her felt it in the air around her. It wasn't anger, it wasn't resentment, it was resolve. the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to raise its voice or justify itself. And as she moved through the corridor toward the next engagement, the same staff members who had watched her leave in tears now exchanged glances that said everything. Something had changed. Inside the palace, word of her return traveled fast. The king, who had been pacing in his private office, reportedly paused when he heard she was back. For a man who has spent his entire life preparing for the throne, it was a moment that confronted him with an uncomfortable truth. Leadership doesn't just require authority, it requires understanding. And in pushing Catherine too far, he had crossed a line that even he hadn't fully recognized until it was already behind him. Camilla, meanwhile, watched Catherine closely, not with suspicion, but with a certain degree of caution. She had seen many royal storms in her lifetime, but this one was different. Catherine wasn't rebelling. She wasn't challenging hierarchy or protocol. She was simply refusing to be the emotional foundation for an institution that had relied on her a little too heavily for a little too long. And in doing so, she revealed something that no advisor, no strategist, no staffer could deny. She was indispensable. As Catherine entered the event space, poised, polished, and composed, the cameras immediately captured her. And though she smiled, the world noticed something deeper behind her expression, a strength that hadn't been there the day before, a message that didn't need to be spoken aloud. And within minutes of those images circulating online, public speculation exploded. What happened? Was she upset? Did something go wrong? Why did she look different, stronger somehow? Royal commentators rushed to analyze every frame, every gesture. Some said she looked tired. Others said she looked fierce. But the majority agreed on one thing. Catherine was reclaiming control of her narrative. And in a monarchy built on perception, that kind of shift carries more power than any decree or announcement. Back inside the palace, the king finally asked for a private meeting with her, a calmer, gentler conversation this time. And though no details leaked, one insider hinted that it ended with a quiet understanding. Not a dramatic reconciliation, not a sweeping apology, but something that mattered more. Respect. The kind of respect that acknowledges everything Catherine has given and everything she still means to the future of the crown. As the day drew to a close and the palace settled into a fragile calm, one thing was undeniable. Catherine had emerged from this moment not weakened, but strengthened, not diminished, but defined. And for a family that has spent years trying to hold its legacy together, her newfound resolve might just be the one thing capable of keeping the monarchy standing.